If you're like me and you want to take your sewing up a level and end up with a more couture instead of a high street finish to your garments, this is the vlog for you. I've got a 10-point plan and we're going to go through it together. Hi there, I'm Christine the Gemini Stitcher and welcome to my little sewing space. Yes, you heard me right. Even though I've been sewing for over 40 years, shock horror, that's a long time, isn't it? I've never achieved what I consider to be a couture finish consistently with my garment sewing. And I've made myself a 10-point plan that I'm going to print out. I'm going to stick it up on the wall behind my sewing machine to remind me, and fingers crossed, going forward, I'm drawing a line in the sand now and I'm going to stick to this plan, and it'll be interesting to see if I get a more couture finish to my garments, they fit better, and they look as good on the inside as they do on the outside. So what on earth am I going to do to achieve this amazing finish? Let's start at the beginning, because with this plan, a lot of the work is done before you even turn your sewing machine on. And it's all to do with the pattern and preparing the pattern ready to cut out, cutting it out and cutting it out correctly. So the first thing that I'm going to do every time I sew a garment is take my body measurements. Our bodies fluctuate such a lot, and with my recent bra fitting experience, it's set a light bulb off in my head that I actually need to measure more regularly. So point number one on my 10-point plan is, before you even cut your pattern out, take your body measurements. Check your tape measure as well, because that can stretch out over time. So measure it against a solid ruler and see that it's not stretched out. And if it is, get yourself a new tape measure before you even start. So take measurements, upper bust, main bust, down the arm. I take the arm measurement from the apex up here and down to my sleeve length. When you're doing this, if you're doing it yourself, it's not always easy, is it? But you should always do it with a bent arm and do it like that, not straight, because if you do it like that, your sleeves are going to be too short. So upper bust, bust, your arms, your waist. Your waist is your natural waist, not where you think your waist should be. So do the teapot, check where the crease is, and that is your natural waist, not necessarily the narrowest point of your midriff. Your hips, which is your widest point over your derriere. And then if you're doing trousers, you're going to need to take your inside leg measurement as well. So get all those measurements written down every single time you make a garment. Point number two is still measuring, so keep that tape measure handy. Next, we're going to open out the pattern pieces. We're not cut into it yet, it's all still on the big sheets. And we're going to measure the actual garment piece sizes. Particularly if you're doing a dress, I would focus on the bust area, the shoulders. Check how they compare to the actual measurements that they say this pattern is. So get the grid up with the measurements, look at your size, get the size on the pattern piece, check across the middle. So if you're checking the bust, do it from under the arm to the centre, and then that is a quarter, so you're then going to times that by 4. Don't forget to take your seam allowance off. So if there's a 1 centimetre seam allowance on a top, you've got 2 seams, so you need to take 2 centimetres out of that measurement, and just cross-reference that with the actual chart just to double check that the pattern actually measures what they say it does. Now, point number 3 is a personal one with me, but it might resonate with you as well. And it's to embrace the full bust adjustment. I've been sewing, as I said, over 40 years, and I've never done a full bust adjustment. Shock, horror. Now, my recent bra experience really shocked me. I went in there thinking I was a 34C. I knew I was too small in the cup size, and that's why I went, and I ended up being a 32G. So I need to embrace the full bust adjustment. Now, I've done my measurements, and with the bra on that I now wear, because my old bra was flattening my boobs out, which was distorting things and made me think. So before I had my new bras fitted, my upper and my main bust, there was only 2 inches between. So logic, don't need a full bust adjustment. However, now there's a generous 3 inches between. So I've embraced a full bust adjustment, particularly on woven garments. I am absolutely going to be doing a full bust adjustment for every garment that I make. Now, I found a really good video on Minerva's site, so on how to do a full bust adjustment. There's various different ways of doing it, and I will pop all the links for those below because they are really simple to follow, and I will be using them myself. Action point number 4 is something that I know I should do. I do it, but I don't do it consistently. So it's one that everybody should be doing, and we all know we should do it, but do we actually do it? And it's marking all the notches and placement points on your pattern while it's still pinned when you've just cut it out. I have a terrible habit of marking as I go. I'll put the notches in consistently, no problem, but the actual placement marks, I tend to do it as I'm sewing, so they're not necessarily going to be 100% pinpoint accurate, are they? The only way to achieve that is to do it as soon as you've cut your pattern piece out while the pins are still in and it can't move around. So the reason I wasn't putting my placement points in is because I've been using a iron off or wash off marker pen and just putting a little dot through the pattern, which is great, they do work. And the only problem is that if you use an iron off one and then you iron that piece of your garment, chances are before you need to use that placement line, you're going to lose it, aren't you? So I am consistently going to use tailor's tacks going forward. Yes, we're going old school. It was how I was taught at school to mark my placement points. They don't move, they're there. So going forward, tailor's tacks all the way. So the next point is all about dart position, which is something else I've never done, but embracing the boobs is my mantra, and I'm going to get the bodice fitting correctly for my new boob size. So this one is all about the placement of the dart. Now, I've never moved a dart, ever, but we're all different shapes and sizes. The pattern is a standard. So it might fit you as is, it might not, but you should always check, and I will be doing going forward. So how are we going to do this? Well, it's a 2-part process. Part 1 is to measure between the highest point of your boobs. Now that might be your nipple, it is with me. So measure from one nipple to the other and write that measurement down. And then the second measurement we're going to take is from your collar down diagonally to the apex. of your nipple. Make sure you're wearing the bra that you're going to be wearing when you wear the garment. So write those 2 measurements down. Then get your front bodice piece in front of you. And we're going to measure. Take your seam allowance off. So mark your seam allowance all the way round. If it's 1 centimetre, draw that in. Then measure from inside the seam allowance to where the dart finishes from the inside fold or the inside edge. Times that by 2. Now that isn't going to match your nipple to nipple measurement to start off with, because if you had a dart that finished right on your nipple, you'd be doing a bit of a Madonna look, wouldn't you? So that is always going to be 2 centimetres less. So take a centimetre, divide your nipple to nipple measurement by 2, take a centimetre off that, and then measure from the inside edge, less the seam allowance, to the point, and see if that matches. If that doesn't match, then you need to bring that dart in so that it matches your measurements. I hope that made sense. I will be putting a link to a vlog below that I've done this from. It's a new vlogger that I found. Well, she's not new, it's just I've happened upon her. And she talks a lot of sense. She has some amazing vlogs, and one of them is all about darts and measuring. So I'll put the links to those 2 vlogs below as well. So you're measuring that bit. We've got the dart point correct, but what about this bit? So we've done that measurement from our collar down to our nipple. Do the same measurement on the pattern piece, but bring it in 2 centimetres because your point is 2 centimetres out. Look at that measurement, compare that to yours, and if it doesn't match, if you're really lucky, you'll need to raise it, or if you're like me, you'll probably need to lower it a little bit. So then you lower your dart, and that's really easy to do. You just draw a rectangle round the dart on the pattern, cut the rectangle out, measure down from the top of the cutout how many how many centimetres you need to lower it. If it's 1 centimetre, leave a gap, retape it in and fill in that gap with a bit of tissue paper. But as I said, I'll put the link below because it was really, really simple to do. So get your darts in an accurate place. So we've made all our alterations on our patterns. The other 2 things that I always do is my narrow shoulder adjustment. So I always measure the shoulder and bring that in because I'm narrow shouldered. And the length, because I'm a 5-foot midget, I always have to use the the shortening lines to alter the length of any garment that I make. But we'll not go into that because that is fairly simple to do. So we've got our pattern all ready and we're going to lay it on our fabric. Now, the next point is all about the grain line. Now, I would say about 80% of the time I do follow this trick. But there's the odd time that I don't, so having my 10-point plan up on my wall is going to remind me, fingers crossed. And that's to measure your grain line. So every pattern piece will have a grain line on it, and it's got to run down the pattern of your fabric. Put your pattern piece on where you want it to be. If it's on the fold, that's fine. If it's placed anywhere else on the pattern, before you pin it all down, pin the top of the grain line and measure from the top of that arrow to the selvage. Make a note of that. Then pin do it by eye, pin the bottom of the arrow and measure. If that doesn't measure the same as the top, then take the pin out and move it either way until it measures the same as that top of the arrow. and that will make sure that your grain line is perfectly straight. And do that with every piece that's got a grain line marking on it. Point number 7 is all about using these, and it's about pressing. Press your garment seam every time you sew a seam. So in addition to pressing the seams, if you're doing a sleeve, use a sleeve roll and put it up the centre of the sleeve so that you're only pressing the seam that you want to press. And if you're pressing curves, darts, sleeve heads, use your tailor's ham so that you're pressing it on the curve, not on the flat. Now, I do press my seams religiously. What I don't do religiously is use these. So they're going to sit by my iron and remind me to use them every time that I'm doing a sleeve or I'm doing a curved seam. This next point is a bit of an eye-opener for me because it's something that I think is really going to take my garments up a notch. And it's to do with woven garments. And it's not using the overlocker to finish your seams. Now, this is a controversial point, I know. I, again, watched the lady whose details I'm going to put below. The channel is called Digital Pattern Library, and there are a lot of vlogs on there, and I'm eating them up. They are all really good vlogs for anybody who wants to take their pattern, their garment making up a notch. She talks real sense, and I totally agree with her now. I didn't. I thought overlocking was the creme de la creme. I now don't. She explains why, as a professionally trained designer and garment maker, she does not use an overlocker on woven fabrics. So what do we do? Well, the obvious one is to do French seams, isn't it? And I love doing French seams, so I'm going to embrace that process going forward. But a French seam doesn't always work, does it? And I thought, so what do you do when you're sewing a sleeve in that's got a few gathers in? Can't do a French seam, it'll be far too bulky. Well, what she's suggested that you do is invest in a rolled hem foot. Now, I haven't got one, need to get a rolled hem foot, rapid, and then I'm going to practice with it because, you know, it's not going to be as simple as it looks, is it? But for my sleeves, I'm going to do a rolled hem on the seams. That's hopefully what's going to happen. I'll let you know. That might be the one area where I cave and do overlocking, but I'm hoping I'll master the rolled hem foot, and then that's what I'll do for the sleeves. So you can also use bias binding. You can use bias binding that matches the fabric so that you can't see it. You can do contrasts. So inside quilted jackets, I always do bias binding for the finish. I never overlock. So I just need to take that into other woven garments as well and do some bias bound finishes and see how I get on with that. And then if I'm making trousers, I can do a few flat felled seams, can't I? So there's a few options there. If you know of any more finishes for seams that do not include an overlocker, put them in the comments below. I'm all ears. We're nearly there with the 10-point plan. Point number 9 is something that I'm going to find a little bit difficult because it's something that I've traditionally not enjoyed doing. But I need to change my mindset on this one, and it's embrace hand stitching. Shock horror, I know. Step away from the sewing machine and do some delicate hand stitching for things like hems, No more sewn on the machine, no more cheating with the blind hem foot on my machine. Hand stitch my hems. Oh, that's going to be a hard one, but it's that stage, isn't it, where the garment's finished but it's not finished, and then if you're going to then hand stitch the hems, you're talking another hour's work. Well, you are with me anyway, at least, because I'm not right good at it, but I will get better. So hand stitching hems, hand stitching the insides of bias bindings, I already do that one, so that one's an easy one to remember. The next hand stitching is inside the collars, where you're putting either the collar or the collar stand, sewing it down on the inside instead of trying to be clever and stitching in the ditch, and then it doesn't really work, and then thinking, well, it doesn't matter, it's underneath the collar, nobody will see. No anymore. Hand stitching that down delicately and take my time. And the last bit of hand stitching is as similar to the collar. It's when you're doing a waistband on trousers, or if a skirt's got or dress has got a waistband in the middle. On the inside, instead of trying to be clever and stitching in the ditch, which is a bit hit and miss, I'm going to hand stitch that down on the inside. So lots of hand stitching coming in my life. Action point number 10 is my little treat for following points 1 to 9, and it's embellishments. So before I start sewing my garments, I know it's point 10, but I need to think about it at the beginning, is decide, can I embellish this garment and make it unique by using embroidery on my embroidery machine, decorative stitches, which I'm really into at the moment, braids, ribbon, lace, you get my drift, all these little things. The buttons that I use need to match the garment properly, no more, oh well, that will do, and more covered buttons as well to give that couture finish on the outside. And when I've done all of that, got my garment, fingers crossed it fits after all that work, I need to remember to put a label in every garment that I make and be proud of my couture level garments. So I hope you found that informative. I'm drawing a line in the sand now. This is it. No more overlocking on woven garments, and I'm going to follow that 10-point plan. And every garment that I make going forward, I'm going to be open and honest about it. I'm going to show you the inside of the garments, show you the finish. I might not do it all 100% all of the time, but it's practice, isn't it? Makes perfect. And hopefully in a few months' time, it will all come naturally to me and I won't have to look at that plan. Let me know if there's anything that you do that takes your garments to the next level that I've not mentioned, and put them in the comments below. I could end up with a 50-point plan, couldn't I? But I'm definitely following those 10 couture points on my plans, and we will see how my garments turn out going forward. When I've made a few of them, I'll compare. If I've made the same garment before, I'll bring the original out as well, and we can compare them with the couture finished one and see if it's really worth it or not. I'm sure it will be. I spend hours and hours and hours sewing and spend a lot of money on my fabrics, so this is going to embrace the love of fabric, the love of sewing, and hopefully have some amazing garments at the end of it. Hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Take care, guys.